Hi, everyone. So excited to be here with my good friends Dave and Jason. I know if you've been tuning in on Thursdays, you've seen quite a bit of Jason and Dave. And Kelly may be able to make it today. I know she's busy working down in Houston, and it's not always easy when you're traveling to set up the capabilities to live stream. So if Kelly can't make it, she'll be here in spirit at least. With that, the word of the day is reinvention. And hopefully, everybody has an opportunity to do better, be better, and to get better. With that, let me swing it over to Dave, and Dave can bring up a little bit of Dave. And first thoughts on reinvention, Dave. I think Dave froze up a little bit, so we'll swing it over to Jason. Jason.
All right, good morning, everyone. Yeah, we want to reinvent some of this internet stuff we're dealing with. Yeah, good morning. It's great to be here, Don. Thank you so much for always being such a gracious host and bringing us all
Hey guys, it's
together.
great to be back after a holiday, and sorry I missed last.
Yeah, I think Dave, you might have to sign off and sign back on. That usually does the trick. So I'll move over to Jason again, and Dave hopefully will come back and be bigger, better than ever before. Jason.
Yeah, so, I always like to start with a definition. And I looked it up today, and this one, I mean, obviously it's a definition, but I don't agree with kind of the context of it. But I'll just say this. One of the things it did say is, it says, something changes so much it appears entirely new. I don't think reinvention needs to be that drastic. I think Don, you just said it, we reinvent ourselves every day. Hopefully we're continuing to grow. I mean, we physically reinvent ourselves all the time. We're slacking off cells, we're growing new cells. It's an ongoing process. It's a process of nature, and we are a huge part of nature. So it's exciting, and it's just how you look at it and how you decide to do it. It's inevitable. It's going to happen. If you try to fight it, then that's the challenge. When you try to stay, I think one of two things. When you try to stay the same for the sake of staying the same, or when you try to change for the sake of trying to change, I think that's when the challenge is. It's a natural process. There's a flow to life. I think when you find yourself within that flow and find what works for you, that's when you find that so-called sweet spot. So I think it's really exciting to be here with you all today and to start this conversation off, and let's see where it goes.
Well, sounds great. It always seems to go in a better way than we anticipate. So it's just a little bit of free flowing. So back to you, Dave. What's your initial thoughts on reinvention?
Well, let's hope that I can stay connected this time. I think Jason hit it on the head. It's a natural progression. And, when I first think of it, reinvention, I went to definitionally a little bit with Darwin, these little changes over time that show up drastically. And I completely agree with Jason that it's not a change for change's sake, and it shouldn't be a drastic 180 out from where you were. But we grow and we build and we learn from what we've experienced, and how we change. We can become a new person, better person individually or as a part of society.
Okay, well, that's a good start to reconfirm what Jason was able to say. And reinvention naturally takes off on the term invention. So it's creating something valuable or interesting or unique and continually doing that process over time, which I think relates to what Dave was saying about evolution. You got to start at the root or at the beginning, and then based on where you find yourself or where you want to find yourself, either way, you find a different twist or turn that makes it a little bit more interesting. So invention and interesting and innovation, there's a lot of ins involved, and possibly entry, which is finding yourself inside of something you were not inside of before. I know it seems kind of circular, a lot of this conversation, but it's also looking inside of yourself. And, you only have control over yourself. You can look out and wish and dream and hope, and maybe it does some good on affecting the outside world. But the fastest changes are the ones you make on your own, which usually takes some level of commitment, and sustainability is important. It's kind of interesting, and what you read, what you see, who you're around affects what you think and what your mindset is. And I'm finishing the Leonardo da Vinci Audible, which is, I think, 28 hours.
Wow.
And a lot of it is, things that I'm not as relatable to, like art and technique and all of that, and describing every painting in detail. But what you find is that term Renaissance man, which could apply to Renaissance women too, in that they do so many things at the same time, whether they're a writer, a poet, a philosopher, an artist. And it's because of the, I believe, way of doing things that can be easily reapplied. And that's why you see some singers are just as good at dancing or any other artistic creativity. And even like in sports, where you see people like, in Colorado Buffalo land, Travis, plays defense and offense every play, and has learned how to adapt to that. And I think that's really the key, is being aware of what your capabilities are, and then really deciding what you can do with them. And so many people have so much capacity and ability, and for some reason don't have the motivation or the interest in really developing that and continuing with it. So most people do as little as possible for as long as they can, in order just to get by. And until something's chasing them, or they feel they have no choice, they get rolling again. Other people decide, hey, I don't need to get the wake-up call to go out and start doing things I know are right. And I think honesty has a lot to do with it. Is, what was right at 20 years old isn't going to be appropriate when you're 30, 40, 50 and higher. And when do you make the turn to say, too much of this is not good, when I'm sacrificing too much of that? And I think that's where balance comes in. And, we talk about success and we talk about effort, but how many people are focused just on one area and they suffer in all the other areas of their life? And what was the point? So, with that said, Jason, how do you take that to another level?
So much good stuff. And something you said sparked something inside of that I was thinking about, reminding me of one of my recent mentors. I've been working with him for about 3 years now. He's probably in his early 80s. He was born in Montana, and his family run newspapers, and he decided to go into, I don't know which religion, so I don't know the title, but basically to be a pastor. And he went through seminary school, and that was his focus, and it just didn't work out. And he did some other things, and then it ended up being a college professor. And he was a college professor and retired from UC Davis, which is a very reputable school out here. It's close to where I live. And he's a mentor, and we've got a good friendship. And we were talking the other day, and just having a conversation, one of those, picking each other's brains and talking about good stuff. And I was like, and I made the comment, I said, well, you understand, you're really intelligent, you're a college professor. And he, in his Montana aw shucks kind of way, he goes, I'm not that smart, but I know how to think. And I think that speaks to kind of what we're talking about reinvention, is, having that idea of maybe you don't know everything. And that's what scares some of us sometimes about changing, is the unknown. But if you have a strategy, if you have a way to know how to think and how to approach things, that's that structure that stays the same. That's that part of you, like I was saying about, I don't agree with the definition of appears entirely new, because we're always going to be us to an extent. But that part of us that knows how to process all these other new endeavors, that's what leads you to success, and being willing to take that leap. I have another friend that we were just talking to last night. We had a group conversation, and she's an author, and she's written a couple books, and she was talking about being concerned about the outcome of this book that she was working on. Well, people are going to pick it up. Is it going to get published? Is it this and that? And I was coming from my Buddhist kind of way. I was like, well, do what you do because you do it. You know, be happy in that process. The process is the reward. Living of life is the reward. So reinvention, it's that process of reinventing yourself. That's the reward. You know, where you get to, that's the icing on the cake. That's the good stuff. You know, that's just the extra stuff. But it's that process of changing. You know, don't get stuck in the way. I can't imagine a life, a doldrum life, where you just do the same stuff day after day and it just gets repetitive. You know, that would drive me bonkers, you know, to use a technical term. So I think one of the keys too is to have that spirit of adventure. I think that's a key to reinvention, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, that's you make so many good points, Jason. Dave, how do you pick up on that?
Excuse me. Sorry. Well, first off, I would say I agree with Jason completely. Again, is that I would just go bonkers, and have gone bonkers just doing the same thing over and over. And you know, it applies to what we were talking pre-show. I'm getting ready to move to Florida, and that's a new reinvention for me. A new getting out of this routine that I've been in for many years, and where I've been in Virginia for 12 years now, and I've kind of grown stale, bored, you know, so I need to find a new change. But it applied to me. I was thinking about this over the last couple of days. Is Jason and I have the unique experience with reinvention as well, being former military. We get stuck into that routine of who we are as military members and veterans now, that when we transfer out, we have to reinvent ourselves, because what we did in the service and the way we acted, the way we, you know, approached people, problems, we have to be a little bit more tactful now, for example, with civilians and with corporations than we did before. So we have to learn. And I think that's a good example of reinvention is going from the military service to civilian world, because we have to learn new skills. We have to reinvent who it is, who we are. Our identity becomes different. And it doesn't happen overnight. You know, if you plan it where you just get out of the military and, oh, I'm going to be a civilian tomorrow, you failed. You're not going to, it's that sudden shift can't happen. And Jason pointed out, you know, little changes over time make the difference. And that's where, you know, I've been looking at this move for several years, and what am I going to do when I get down there? Where do I want to live? How am I going to approach my new job? You know, I've got to learn new people, new culture. It's going to be a new Dave. It's not going to be the same guy who could, you know, who had to wear warm clothes in the winter because it's going to be warmer down there, for example, which I love. But we're always going through this process. And if we get so rigid in our thinking that we're just going to be who we are today, tomorrow, and the next day and the year after that, then we've lost the battle. And we've lost the understanding of what nature is trying to do with us.
Yeah, I think you both make quality points. You know, looking at reinvention, a lot of it is based on curiosity, because most people look at reinvention and they look at achievement. Like, if I reinvent myself, will I make more money? Will I make nicer friends? Will I do this? Will I do that? Versus, I'm a little tired. I'm a little bored. You know, it's not challenging enough. And you have to challenge yourself to get better and stretch a little bit more than people are used to. What I always, you know, depend on is walking in a straight line, so that if it's not working out, I know exactly how to get back to where I started. You know, so, you know, you can move forward and say, oh, not quite what I was looking for. I can go exactly where I was if I choose to, just like Dave. Dave can go to Florida for a while and make a decision and say, well, I really did like Virginia better, or this isn't working out as planned. Nobody likes to retrace their steps, but it's an option. So it's not like, hey, I can't go back. I remember moving from Detroit to Denver when I was in my 20s. And it was hard for everybody to appreciate or understand, because they looked at their world as the world I should be in because they're in it. right? And how can you leave your family, your friends, your business, everything, and go off to a strange city like Denver? Don't know what you're going to do, don't know anybody there. But that was the fun of it. Is I always knew I could fail terribly in Denver and nobody back in Detroit would ever know about it. Where if I was living in Detroit, I'd be with them every week or two, and it'd be like they'd be micromanaging my life. And you'd start to have a struggle between honesty and between yourself, and you'd always be, well, I'm going to hurt their feelings if I don't do this, or they're going to feel bad about that. And that influences your decision. And if you don't get out at a certain time, some people never get out. I had a sister that lived probably within a square mile of her house, and her whole world was just shopping around there and the restaurants there. She had no interest in traveling or seeing the world. And that's not a value judgment. It's just what's appropriate, what's comfortable for people. And I think at the end of the day, you'd have to say, is this getting me to happiness? Is this getting me to fulfillment and satisfaction? And if it is, you're exactly where you want to be. You don't have to climb Mount Everest. You can look at Mount Everest anytime you want on YouTube. You can participate in things that you could never afford, but be a good spectator instead of a participant. And I guess that's a big question. Do you have to be the star of the show, or could you be a supporting actor in the show? And I think that's the difference between individuality and being part of a core, right? Where you're one of 50 and you need to act as one of 50. If you get out of line or you get in front or far behind, you're starting to impact the rest of the group. And maybe there's a balance between balance where you can play the role as a teammate and you can be an individual player at a different time. So there are no real absolutes that says this is the way it is. And there's things you're doing now you can never imagine. And there's things you imagine doing that you would never do now. But that's letting life take you by the hand, and show you things and give you opportunities to make decisions on what you've just seen or heard, right? What becomes doable, you tend to want to participate in. And I think that's the key is, lifelong learning. They say when you graduate, let's say from a university or a high school, they always have a commencement exercise, they call it. But, commencement means the beginning, not the end. This is when you take the education and you put it to work. And, I think to Jason's earlier point, going to school didn't teach me a lot, but it taught me how to learn how to learn. And I think that was important because, in hindsight, especially in my day, most of everything you had to learn and take tests on were rote memory, right? Here's dates of battles and here's names of people and when they died and when they were born. And you're sitting there cramming to repeat it the next day or two. And now you just say, geez, I could Google that. Slide rules and all those calculators are unnecessary now. And you have to ask yourself, what is learning today? And there was a saying that, a formal education will make you a living, a self-education will make you a fortune. And those people who know to learn without structure, without direct guidance. I know when I was going to school, if they would just said, what are you really excited about? And allow you just to take courses in that, as opposed to say, well, you need so much of this and so much science and so much math and so much history. And it's like, what for? I'd rather be happy and excited. And I think people would learn more, learn longer if they were passionate about what they were being taught and what they were interested in. And I think that will change too, along with the ability to be located. When I was going to school, the only way you go to school is take a car or a bus and go to school. Now, if you're in the remotest part of who knows where, you can plug into a Harvard lecture. You can, participate in that. And also, it becomes more democratic, where more people could afford remote learning than they could actually moving to Madison, Wisconsin, or Ann Arbor, Michigan. So, there's a lot to it. One has to ask themselves, and before we ask ourselves, I'll just say that Carrie's here. And Carrie says, how does the ginger man keep the cold air out of his house during the holidays? Icing on the windows. Well, one thing I'll say about Carrie, keeps it on the G rate, which is always good. And Carrie also says, well, I had to wait for this to pop up. Now I found Don Day. Good morning to everyone. Yeah, I think one thing we've learned about reinvention is there are certain things we have no control over, which a lot of times is internet connections or restream abilities. But you know what? It's only a surprise the first time. Then it gets easier because it's almost like the weather. If you're used to having rain once in a while and it rains, it's like, what happened here? Usually most people in the other extreme, where when is the sun showing up again, which is a lot of the country. And hopefully Dave will see a lot more sunshine in Florida than he does in Virginia. So moving back to Jason, and that's the beauty of this show, is you never know what's next, or even who's next, or who you're going to be talking with. So keeps you a little bit more on your toes, Jason.
Yeah, to that point, I was already gonna. That's a great segue, because these LinkedIn Lives, that's a huge opportunity to reinvent yourself, and through trial and error. And it's a safe space, in a way for you to come out here and have these conversations and interact with the community, and to grow, and to see what you want, and to see what works for you, and to try things out. That's one of the beauties of it, and people can see that, people can feel that. And so you're being your genuine self. We're sitting here and I'm just kind of chuckling because today is rather challenged technically. We're seeing more than a few things pop up, with Kelly not being able to make it, and then Dave, and then I just dropped out. I didn't even get a notice. I just dropped out. But how we're responding to it, hopefully people can see, oh, these guys are okay. They're dealing with it. And if you hadn't had 1,000 shows, and if I hadn't had probably whatever my number is that I've had with you alone, let alone all the other podcasts I've done, it might be a little more challenging. But that's through trial and error. That came through doing this and trying things and working at it. And that's the key to reinvention, is not just being stuck with, I'm going to go from X to Y. And if I don't get to Y, then that's not who I am. But having the opportunity to see that there's a lot of nuance between those two as you're growing, and it might be a totally different direction you end up on. So that's one thing. The other thing I wanted to mention is, you were talking about this, and I wrote down some notes saying, why are you changing? What's influencing you, and why do you want it? Why do you want to change, and what's causing you to want to be the way that you are, reinventing yourself, for lack of being able to explain it. What's external that's making you internally want to change to that level? And I think change has to be internal, because if you follow where the wind takes you, you're just going to be a leaf in the wind. And watching a leaf in the wind is kind of beautiful. It might be, to some of us, but it's not getting anywhere. And so if you take direction and you take directed action towards that, that's going to have you end up going where you want to go. And like I said before, it might not be where you originally thought you were going to end up, but by taking that directed action, you're going to discover, oh, I don't like this. Oh, I do like this, And the last thing I'll say on that is the homeostasis. Our system is made to stay the same, to keep us comfortable and keep us, one of the writers I love, Henry Rollins, he said it's like person floating in lukewarm water. You're just comfortable and la-di-da and things are okay, but you're not going anywhere. You're not doing anything. Like we've mentioned before, that leads for a challenging life. So you have to break out of that. You have to be willing to have a little bit of discomfort to get to the next level of comfort, and then settle. I always say I like to stop and catch my breath when I make a big shift. And it's like, okay, I'm here now. What do I have? Let's take inventory. Let's see what this got me. this worked, this didn't work, whatever. Okay, now what's the next step? And then you start moving to the next step. So it's a process, but it's a process that you have to take action for first, and then see where that takes you.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent analogy or example of people wanting to stay in balance, but also wanting, in order to stay in balance, you have to integrate more things as you go, right? If you stop eating, that's going to affect a lot of things. If you stop making money, that's going to affect a lot of things. And then things affect you just by, in addition, bring a dog in your house and see how that affects your schedule. Have somebody be a guest in your house and see what that does to people's routine. And a lot of times it's uncomfortable, but it's only uncomfortable because maybe you were too comfortable, and people shake you up a little bit by affecting your routine and your ability to adjust without concern. Sometimes you just have to accept what it is for as long as it is and do the best you can with it. There's a lot of people sit down there and put their head in their hands and moan and groan, and all they're doing is passing more time. Nothing's really going to change, except now you're going to have less time to do what you should have been doing. And, it's the opportunity to forget yourself to find a better self as part of reinvention, and so many people want to be on both sides of the fence at the same time, and it's not possible. You're nowhere at that point. And, it's better to make any decision than no decision and let the world decide for you. So I'd rather be the captain of my ship, even if it's going down, as opposed to just have no control and someone else is driving it into the ground. And again, there are no absolutes. What you can say something and it applies to this, and you could say the opposite, and you could say, well, that applies also.
Yeah.
But where are you over time? And I think, just like Jason mentioned, with shows like this, out of 900 shows, 5% rated like the highest ever, 5% probably rated the lowest ever, and somewhere in the middle where we're the majority of them. But at a certain point, what did you learn that you can now do better? Or now say, I've learned it. There's nothing wrong with capping something off at the right point and starting fresh again. That's what artists do. If all they did was do the best at one thing, they'd have one painting after their whole life. But, even getting back to Leonardo, I can't tell you what percentage he never finished. And some things he never published. He kept for himself. There were paintings he would carry around with him that he just loved so much, he just kept for himself, and no one ever knew about him. What they found out is his sketchbooks and his notebooks, which were phenomenal. And they can see what could have been. But again, who knows in 1490s what the world will be looking like 500-600 years from now. But it was his method, it was his technique that actually had the most influence than his actual work. And the key is how do you pass it along? And that's where legacy comes in. So when you're reinventing yourself, it's not just for you, it's for people around you. It's for people who come after you. This show may turn out to be a masterpiece in 300 years. Someone looks at it and they find something unique or different that we never intended. And it also is just like a photo album. It's great to see older relatives in their younger days doing some dynamic or interesting things, and you treasure those things. Well, we're putting things out there for the future that whoever knows us or would like to know us has the opportunity to meet us in our optimum state, or at least in our motivated learning situation. And I think, we set the example not by how well we do, but just by doing it.
Yeah.
I had no intent of ending up where I ended up, and I'm still growing. But there's at least now 70 people who have been on the show and now have their own show or have watched the show and decided now it's time. Why? Because they say if Jason can do it and Don can do it, I don't see anything really Superman about either one of these guys, then I should be able to do it. And, maybe that's also a cue to say, well, if you could do this and you didn't think about it, what else could you do that you weren't thinking about? And it's like dominoes. And, it's the other thing about having momentum and keeping busy. There's days where you just don't want to stop because you're getting so much done and you're just crossing off your list. And there's other days where if you could stay in bed all day and not do anything, you might choose that. And maybe that's not a bad choice if you've been working really hard for a long time, and decide, hey, there's nothing like quiet. There's nothing like being in the dark with my thoughts. There's so many times I used to escape myself by watching TV or doing something else. And sometimes it's better just to come back to yourself and give yourself some time to meditate, some time to reflect on something. And coming into the new year, I think that's what a lot of people hopefully do. And they start out that way with their New Year's resolutions. I'm going to lose 20 pounds. I'm going to get stronger. I'm going to get better looking. I'm going to do this, and everything else. And it sounds great, and it is great, and it is possible. But then the work goes into it. Well, I got to get up early to go to the gym, if I want to be in shape. I got to give up my potato chips and ice cream every night if I want to look better. And the thought is cool, and the ability to attach to it is fantastic. But can you maintain? And that's why it says, the mode is really start comfortable and stay there until you feel like you can move to the next level. Too many people attack something like, I'm going to start lifting 100 pounds tomorrow. Well, you might do it for tomorrow, but after a while you feel like this is work, this is hardship, this is pain. Those things start to draw you back to remembering when you didn't have to wake up so early. And then you start making excuses. Well, I could have got the better position with the better pay, but I didn't do what I should have done or people expected of me to do. And you say, it's okay. And that's just kind of a lie you tell to yourself, is that if it was okay, why did you decide you wanted it so bad until you found out you couldn't get it? And then it sounds more like sour grapes. And that's the kind of projection you have. And I think that's the other obligation, responsibility, or accountability you have to others is, I could fail myself and I could almost accept that. But if I fail a lot of people depending on me, I couldn't do that. And when you live a bigger life for a bigger reason, you forget about yourself. How many people in emergency situations risk life and limb because someone's in danger and their impulse is, I can't let that happen if I have anything to do with it. And that's where courage comes in. What's easy to do is easy not to do. And there's so many people who say, well, if it's comfortable, I'll do it. Well, comfort only lasts so long. So again, a little circular there, moving it back to Jason. This is like a chess game where the pieces keep.
Yeah, it's great. You brought up New Year's resolutions, and that's obviously the time of year that we're at, and I think what all comes back to, everything you said, and there's so many great points in there. But I think what I distilled from that is you have to have a big enough why. That's what it all comes down to. Talk about reinvention, you talk about doing what you want to do, you talk about having a resolution for the new year. Why? Why do you want it? There's the Nietzsche quote about, you can do big enough, as long as you have a big enough why, you can accomplish anything, or you can deal with anything. It's a little more negative, but that's the reality, is why do you want this? And it has to be bigger than why you don't want it. Getting in shape has to be greater than getting up and it being cold and getting dressed and going out running first thing in the morning. All these things have to be bigger than the reasons not to. And then it also comes self-compassion, where you say, what, if I miss a day of running, I'm going to be okay. Not beat yourself up and, oh, you're never going to accomplish anything, and you're not going to do it, and you're not going to get in the late, so you might as well just sleep in every day. So there's that balance. But you have to have a picture of yourself achieving what you want to achieve and getting where you want to get. that has to be a bigger, brighter, more compelling picture than where you're currently at. And that could be challenging. Life can be tough. I think all of us can say that. We've all seen it in our lives where life can be tough. And sometimes, respect the people that are going through hard times and just get out of bed in the morning. And so we're talking about some of these grandiose goals, some of these big goals, but sometimes just getting out of bed in the morning and taking that shower or feeding your pets or something, that could be a huge first step. And hats off to those that are there. If you're struggling, just take that first step. And reinvention doesn't have to be something huge. Reinvention doesn't have to be this huge, grandiose, this huge goal of, oh, I'm going to be the president. I'm going to do this. I'm going to run my own company. I'm going to whatever. It could be something, just a change in a direction that you want to go. So as we talk about reinvention, as I think we've been kind of talking about it as, bigger goals and stuff, sometimes if you're not happy with where you're at, reinvention is being a little happier with where you're at. I was talking to my wife last night, and just a conversation similar to this, actually. And one of my mentors and someone that we both were blessed to have spent a week with in a retreat is Dan Millman, Way of the Peaceful Warrior. Dan's an amazing human. He's done so much. He's an author. He's who's a gymnastic coach. He's an Olympian, gymnastic Olympian, gold medal winner. Just amazing person. And someone asked him one time and said, "Are you think you're a great person?" He said, "Well, I have great moments." And I think that's the key to life is we get caught up in this grand reinvention. I'm going to be this huge. Reinvent each moment. I got up today, I had a little bit of headache, but you know what? Got up, took an aspirin, feel better. I'm here having this great conversation with you, and then when Dave was here, and it's better. And I'm moving forward, and I feel better for it, and I'm learning, and I'm gaining the experience of being here with you. And how do we process when the internet's not working well? And it's an opportunity to grow. And I don't want to get a little long-winded on this, but I just wanted to make that point that take opportunities as they show up and reinvent yourself in those small steps, because it gets to the big steps.
Yeah, you make wonderful points there, Jason. And I did just finish the Warrior book by Dan Millman. Took me a while, and that was another thing. Sometimes you start something and you had enough, and then you revisit it and you finish it. I think, and to your point, Nitsky, I guess you could call it, or better than that. But, his quote was, "What doesn't kill you makes you stronger," and sometimes you got to take your medicine in order to get the benefit from it. A lot of people, if you talk about people who had strokes and who used to be active and capable and everything, and now if they can only move their foot, it's a huge success.
Right.
So, one thing about disappointment, failure, if it's accepted properly, it humbles you, makes you more modest. It doesn't make you feel like I need to be king of the world. I just need to be a benefit to myself and the people around me and be able to enjoy the benefit they bring. The other thing is about being your own best friend. How would you talk to someone who has just had some issues or disappointment or failure? Usually it'd be like to build them up again. Like, don't worry, it'll be all right. You'll see. And do you say that to yourself all the time? Or do you decide to really punish yourself with embarrassment, with shame, with, I can't go on, I can't be seen, I can't do this? And, the key word is I, not them. If you did a survey, most of them would say, hey, listen, we don't really care about that much. All we care about is that you're happy, you're healthy, you're free, and that's important to us, whether you came in second or third, when you were hoping for first, because there's tomorrow. If you're just going to rely on the past to determine who you are instead of what you're building for the future, I mean, no building would ever get constructed if somebody wanted rent on the first day you broke ground. It doesn't work that way. It's like the guy who yells at the stove and says, give me fire and I'll give you wood. No, you got to give it wood and then you'll get the fire. And I think what that lends itself is the concept of patience.
Yeah.
Is okay, you wanted it done in a month and now you're into month 3. Well, you're further ahead than you were in 0 month, and you learn probably some along the way. And when it's done, and you don't really think about it after the fact. It's always in the middle, and usually it's because of competition. No one knows where they are until they see where somebody else is. And that goes for running a race. If you're running against a slower person, you're naturally going to slow down. You're probably going to win, but you're not going to run as fast as if you ran against somebody faster than yourself and they're driving you to be a little bit more aggressive in your moves. And you want to test yourself. I mean, if you got a brand new Ferrari, there'd be a point where you want to put that pedal down. You might drive like a normal person, but if you got on a racetrack, you want to see how fast it can go, how fast you can allow yourself to go with it. And I think that's an important thing, is stop before you have to or before it stops you. Look at the buffet line. That's a typical example. Some people just go through it, pick a nice meal and eat it. Some people are like, I'm going to get all my money back plus more. But once you bought into that buffet, your money's not coming back, whether you eat a tablespoon or you eat 6 plates, and you made yourself sick maybe or overweight because it was free. And really, there's nothing that's free. It might have a free price tag, but it's going to have a toll. And I think that goes from reinvention, and we're talking about resolution, review, and reflection, is it's really about, what do I really need to help every other part of me, not in a singular way? And how do I have fun doing things I'm not very good at? And sometimes it doesn't matter how good you are. I mean, golfers, there's people who I love being outside. I love walking. I love being with friends. I love hitting a ball around. It's only at the end where there's that one person that only focuses a scorecard. Did I break my old record? Did I do this? And they lost sight of it, and they lost sight of the people around them. And eventually they lose those people because they're so self-focused. I know shows like this, there's people who all they do is self-promote. They get on, they get their soapbox, and here's who I am, here's what I am, here's why I am. And you know what they're saying? I don't trust anybody but myself to tell you, and I don't trust you to figure it out for yourself. So I'm just going to spell it out for you. And how many people do you have to deal with that have to repeat themselves 10 times? Did you hear what I just said? Let me say it again to you. Let me reinforce it. And, that never works, because anytime you reinforce it, you're actually using force.
Right.
And you're applying pressure. It'd be easier to say, here's a note. I wrote something down. If you forget what I just said, open the note and you'll see it. Notes, I guess now are more text messages. But the point is, all you need is enough to get yourself rolling, and allow nature and time to help you in that pursuit. How many people plan something to the umpteenth degree and find out after, Mike Tyson said it, when he says everybody has a plan for a fight until you get hit in the face, and then your plan goes out the window.
Right.
It's the same thing in life, is trust yourself, trust the world to be there when you're ready for it. You can't set things in motion and keep them in motion. And at the same time, I journeyed in pursuits that allowed me to find the right pursuit along the way. And I never ended up in the original pursuit, right? You take a road with the anticipation of something, and all of a sudden you see a turnoff and you say, wow, there's a big park there, or a monument, or something I might be interested in taking a look at. And, just like a car, everybody has a neutral and a reverse gear to them. Someone could just say, hey, I love where I'm at. I'll spend another hour or another night here because it's exactly what I was looking for without knowing what I was looking for until it found me. And I think that's where people and things meet, is when they find each other in a comfortable place, not in a put a round peg in a square hole and then try to hammer it down. So, Jason, I mean, we cover so many different dimensions and ways of perception.
Yeah.
Really, you can't lose if you choose the right ones to begin with.
Yeah, and so many good points and so much, and I'm like writing down notes and I'm thinking about things, and just that's the beauty of these conversations, is they just open things up. And I was looking at, as we were talking, and I'm just kind of looking at my screen in front of me, I see a leadership event with Kelly and Don, and I was thinking about leadership and how this pertains. Reinvention in leadership is, you find, there's a quote, and I can't remember the quote right now, but you find yourself in service to others. So when you reinvent yourself, think about how you're being of service to others. And that's a huge way to really step out, because sometimes our self-image, sometimes how we feel about ourselves, how we feel about where we're at, can get in the way. But when you start thinking about other people, we tend to dig deeper. A lot of times, that's just, we're pack animals. And sometimes we can find ourselves in the service of others. And that's something that is very important to me. It's just my calling. And through these journeys that I take to be of service of others, I have found things that spark interest and joy in me. So it's very circular. It's very circular. And as we get into the world gets into us. A couple of points I wanted to touch on beyond that. So something that you said that I love, it's something that I talk about a lot. And you're talking about the buffet, and you're paying for the buffet, but then you want to eat it all. And one of the things you were talking about was the price versus the cost. The price of the buffet is one thing, you paid to get in, but what's the cost of eating all that food? Your sluggish metabolism, you might be heartburn, you might stuff like that. And so people don't consider that all the time. When you look at, well, I could, it's like when people say I could buy that, but can you afford that? You might, if you have $100 in your account, you could buy something for $99. But if you only have $100 in your account, you can't afford to spend that $100. And that's so true in life. It's that price versus cost. So as we look at reinventing ourselves and changing, you have to look at, okay, so this is going to be a certain price, my time, my energy, my focus, whatever. But what's the cost? Well, the cost might be time away from my family, time away from what I really love, time away from my health. If you invest so much into working hard, but you don't work out, now your health might suffer. So that's going to be the cost of doing what we do. So weighing that out, whether it's in business or personal, that evaluation of what's this going to cost me in the long run. And if it's beneficial and it's going to be great, then that's usually something to take charge of. Something. And then something else that I wanted to touch on, and this one's, I'm going to go a little far left and I'm going to come back to the center on this one. So this morning I was getting ready for, just my morning routine. I'm shaving, I'm looking in the mirror and stuff. Louise Hay has a thing, and this is challenging. And I think I mentioned it before, maybe once on here, where when in the morning and at night, before when you get up or before you go to bed, you stare at yourself in the mirror in the eyes and say, I love you 10 times. Staring at yourself. And that could be challenging, and it could be hard for some people, for a lot of people actually. But I'd have that practice. I try to do that every day. Well, this morning I was getting ready and I looked in the mirror and I gave myself a smile like you would give a stranger passing in the street. And it caught me off guard. I kind of was like, hi. And I was like, whoa, what's going on here? What's the disconnect? Where are you disconnected from yourself? And so I stopped, I brought myself back to what I was doing, and then I did my process. I looked myself in the eye and I said, I love you, I love you. And the point that I wanted to make through all of that is that I don't want to change because I don't like who I am. I want to change because I love who I am so much. I want to see where I go next. So sometimes when we talk about change, you're like, well, do you not like who you are or whatever? That's not it. It's I love myself so much. And I know that might be hard for some people to get to that point, but that's me personally. I want to make that point is that it's not like, well, I don't like where I'm at. I have an amazing life. I am so blessed. I have so much gratitude for where I'm at. I have a home. I have an amazing wife. I have stuff. I have struggles. I have challenges. We all have bills to pay. We all have ups and downs. I just came off being sick for about a week. Life happens. But I have gratitude for what I have. And based on that, I want to have more. It's not disrespecting where I'm at. I think it's respecting the work that it took to get where I'm at to say, and I'm going to keep going with it. So I think that's a viewpoint, a mindset that we don't have enough, is not changing for the sake of, oh my God, I don't like where we're at. It's like, no, I want to see where we can go next. Where can we take this?
Yeah, and you make so many good points. And Louise Hay is a great teacher. I know she's started out in the religion of science and mind with individuals like Ernest Holmes, and there's so many teachers, and that you can leverage off of that. You could draft off of that. They get you going. They give you some foundation. They give you some perspective. And it's easier to apply what someone's already built a foundation to help you stand on than to figure it all out for yourself. And, I think that's something that I always try to do, is get different philosophies, different teachers, different mentors that I can leverage in 20, 30 minutes. And, I'm still going through her Audible. A lot of it is something you want to savor.
Right.
There's a lot of fluffy books that you can just race through. And even if you missed a few things, you're not missing much. And there's other things you want to really focus on, that word or that sentence they just said, and then see how it relates to what your strategy or philosophy is. And people have to appreciate that you're a collection of every influence and person and situation that you've lived through. And there's a point where you say to yourself, maybe that's a concept I should have never accepted, or maybe it worked for me, but maybe my Uncle Jim wasn't the role model I should have followed. And when you're impressionable and you're young, and you just take whatever's given to you as like potluck and try to use it, that's where reinvention comes in. No different as you go through your closet and you keep buying new clothes over time, and you just crowd your old clothes instead of replacing them. Right? I go to a store and I see things, oh, that's nice, but I'm thinking I haven't even worn the stuff I have already.
Yeah.
So what's the point of getting more of it? And I think that's where people lose themselves. Me and Beverly Glazer were talking the other day about women who have 100 pairs of shoes, and their whole focus that day is to get another pair. Right? And it's not so they have something around their feet that they can walk with. It's style.
Right.
It's boredom. It's doing more of the same because that's all you know. And instead of doing different, you decide to dig deeper and get wider. And maybe that's where hoarders come in. And that's where collectors.
Yeah.
It's like you can't even live in this room because there's so much stuff. And every empty space on a wall is filled with something. And, and it's like it starts to get crowded. And you don't know it. It's like boiling a frog. Things that happen slowly don't seem to get your attention. And, there's that other concept that fear of loss is a bigger motivator than greed. So someone will fight like hell to keep what they have, but to do a little bit better, I'm okay. Why? Because they've learned how to uncomfortably be comfortable, or vice versa. They've learned that, I hate it, but I can deal with it, and now we're talking about tolerance and how much can you accept. And at a certain point, you lose your will to fight. You lose your will to change, and you just get to be submissive to everything around you. And there's people who shake their fist at the sky, and there's people that actually do something. And I think that's where the separation has to come in, is I just can't tolerate this, or I'm better than this. And I don't need to deal with this. And that's where people start to walk away. And that's the hardest thing. Just like people say, no matter how much money you give me, I would never do that. Well, let's see someone put $1 million cash on the table that
Right.
you know you can take home with you. Would you do that? And well, I know I wouldn't, because I don't need $1 million. I don't need more than I have. You know, a wise person told me early in my life, a rich man or woman is someone who has $1 more than they can spend. You know, and once you say, no matter what I need, I'm taken care of. And you also have that resilience and confidence to say, if I have to, I can do better. Whatever it takes, I can do it. You know, if I put my mind to it. You know, I might not do it well, but I'm gonna get some distance with it, or I'm smart enough to know who can help me and plug into them. And I think that's the other thing is, don't be, you know, no man or woman is an island. You know, embrace other people. Like I say, when I want to know about something that's important that relates to Andrew Carnegie, I'll spend time with them. Or the gentleman who said, you know, how to influence people, you know, and I go to him, or Ernest Nightingale. So you can always go to a friendly person, especially if they're on video or on audio, and walk in their shoes, even though sometimes they're talking in relationship. I know, like Catherine Pounder, you know, and her books were really inspirational, had a lot of Christian foundation to it. But it was like, well, Mary was making $8 a week, you know, and she needed $5 more. And she's talking like a 1920, and you say, well, $8 probably wouldn't buy you a hamburger today.
Right.
But it's all relative. And people haven't changed. And, you know, we talked early on about evolution. Well, before we grow another finger, it'll probably be 10,000 years.
Right.
But what we can do with our mind can happen in seconds. So that reinvention happens very quickly. And, you know, the other thing is, you don't know what it is until you see what someone else has with it. You know, your small house doesn't look so small until it's moved next to a huge house. And it doesn't change the house or your ability to live in it, but it's a comparison.
Right.
And all of a sudden you got minimized, even though it was all by comparison. And, you know, a story I always tell is, I had a cousin came to this country with $20 and became fabulously wealthy. He was a doctor, worked very hard. And he came to visit one time, and he was telling about the night he spent at his buddy's house. And it was a compound, and behind this huge wall and multiple buildings. And he said, you know, he's been through 3 recoveries. His kids are a mess. He's gotten 4 divorces. And, you know, it occurred to me, and I had one house I bought and lived there for 30 years. Now my daughter's been living there for 15 years. So when I go home, it's like I never left. But I remember telling him, his name was Dan, or is still Dan. I said, you know, the richest house on the street is the one with the most love and laughter inside of it.
Yeah.
And I will take that house every day. And it was enough, you know. And the nice thing, me and my wife finally did get her dream house, you know, because over 30 years, she kept seeing everybody else move in neighborhoods and getting a better house. And she never complained, but I knew what she wanted. And one day I said, hey, you know, buy a house, and here's a checkbook, do whatever you want with it, right? And I'm never going to say no. And she went full bore. Got an beautiful house. It was 26-foot ceilings in places. I mean, just, the money was just obscene that was being spent, but it was her opportunity.
Right.
And what I appreciated about it is, eventually we had to leave it because it was too much for us.
Right.
Right. And what I liked about our old house is it was so small, you couldn't help but be with everybody in it.
Yeah.
Right. Everybody ended up in the kitchen or the family room, and that was it. So whether you wanted to or not, you were in contact. If you have these huge houses, someone's on the left wing, someone's down in the basement, you never see them. And I always like to be close to everybody. I like to experience that humanity about eating together, about laughing together, about watching movies together. And those are the things that you stick with. I don't remember that expensive something we had. If anything, it was a pain in the ass because I had to maintain it. I had to insure it. I had to take care of it. It's almost like I was working for it and it wasn't working for me. And again, a lot of what works for some people won't work for everybody. So you find out what is best for you and you have those conversations with your wife and your family and say, okay, what is it that would make you happier? Especially if you reached a level of happiness, right? I've already filled my cup. I've got some extra. What can I do to fill your cup? And I think that's where love and kindness come in, is when you do something out of the goodness of your heart, knowing and hoping you don't get repaid for it. Right. Hoping that when you gave a gift, keep it, enjoy it. I don't need anything in return. You get closer to your birthdays. What can I get you? What do you need? And my answer is, I take care of myself so well. Honestly, I don't need anything. If you send me a card, and eventually at one point we decide we're not going to exchange presents. I mean, it's like whatever you need, get during the year. Don't wait for something or somebody. And then the price was the big thing. A lot of people would send me a fruitcake. And that fruitcake cost them more and meant more and that's all they could do.
Right.
Why deny somebody's ability to gift you something from their heart? Even a little kid that writes a little scribble down, you end up framing, because it had meaning. And I think, coming full circle with reinvention is what's meaningful. What will stick with you? What will make you feel better during the tough times? Sometimes you take out a picture and it puts you back on course. And maybe that's all you really need to be rich. So with that, I'll let you close the show. I know we've gone a million different ways, and it wouldn't have been possible with all the different twists and turns.
Yeah, and that's why I enjoyed joining you, Don. It's wealth of knowledge and experience, and it's always great to share. The only thing I could add, I mean, that really could have wrapped up the show right there. The only thing I could add is, awareness. Start with awareness of where you're currently at. We're all changing anyway. We change every day, physically, mentally, emotionally. Why not have it be directed? So start with awareness of where you're at. And not in a way of, not a judgmental way, very compassionate. This is where I'm at right now. I like this. I don't like that so much, and I can change. Where you want to go? What do I want to be? What do I want to have? And sometimes we aim low, sometimes we aim high, and surround yourself with people that are going to make you aim higher. That's the key. Whether they've achieved or not achieved, people that are going to be in your corner. I mention my wife a lot, and she's amazing, and she pushes me to achieve the most that I can. And she has these dreams that sometimes, they call it the pucker effect. You're like, ooh, wow. Sometimes she comes up with these goals, but I'll tell you what, it pushes me. It makes me want to be better. It makes me want to go. Sometimes I didn't see that opportunity. So start with awareness and aim high, and, take that journey and just enjoy it while you're here.
Great words of wisdom. I hope everybody has taken some notes, or at least even without notes, has gotten a different perception or way of defining or refining or reinventing, which is our word, in a better tomorrow. And whatever got you where you are today, there's going to be something else tomorrow coming up. So if you decided, hey, I hit a real valley, well, there's a mountain ahead of you. And if you also have to be modest to know, if I'm at the top of the mountain, I'm going to have to transverse down this mountain and into the valley. And why not be happy knowing that you've already been at the top? You've already persevered through the valley. And life is what you make it. And life is a blessing. Every day I have is something that no one guaranteed, and I don't know no one knows what tomorrow is. And that's why you should focus on what you've had, what you have, and cherish it, because everything will change. And some things are really important, and most things are just window trimming, and understand the difference between them. And if you do that, you'll live a grateful life, a generous life, and there's more life to be shared than to be owned. And I think that's so important. So with that said, we can talk, and that's why these shows are so good. And I learned so much from Jason and Dave and Kelly along the way that I can never even account for, because it's those little nuances, those little facets, that little thing, and the people who took you off a course where you didn't want to be on that course.
Right.
You know, just like watching a comedian. If you can laugh, it's hard to be sad at the same time you're happy, and maybe switch gears. So with that, million different ideas, but only. So thank you so much, Jason, and thank everybody for being here. And